Hello, and a very warm welcome to the SoA at Home Festival. Thank you for joining us today. We're in week 10, and we're very lucky to have Barney Norris as the 10th afternoon tea guest in this series. I'm Paula Johnson, head of prizes and the prizes and awards team at the Society, where from year to year we look at 22 different prizes and awards, from those for new translations from 9 different languages to our very own old established Authors Awards for poetry, biography, novels, short stories and children's picture books, as well as other prizes like the Sunday Times University of Warwick Young Writer of the Year and the ALCS Educational Writers Award. We're very grateful for the help given by our sponsors for these: the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society, Flora Fraser and Peter Soros, the Torday family, and Nicholas Allen. Today's event is part of the 12-week At Home Festival, which is a programme of online events with writers which runs until next month. We'll have about 45 minutes for discussion this afternoon, with an opportunity for you all to ask questions of our speaker, Barney Norris, and those questions will be towards the end of the talk. The chat function is to the right of your screen, and do please type your questions, comments and queries into the chat box as the session proceeds. These sessions are free, but if you do want to donate to the Authors Contingency Fund to support authors in financial difficulty, particularly due to the effects of this current health crisis, you'll find a link in the chat box that will take you straight to the GoFundMe page. Now, I'm so pleased to introduce this afternoon's guest. Barney Norris was born in 1987. After university, he founded the touring theatre company Up in Arms with Alice Hamilton. His plays include Nightfall, performed at the Bridge Theatre, While We're Here, which was up in Arms at the Bush and on tour, Echo's End at the Salisbury Playhouse, Eventide at the Arcola and on tour, the acclaimed Visitors, up in Arms, Arcola and on tour, which was winner of the Critics' Circle Award for Most Promising Playwright and nominated for an Evening Standard Award. His short plays include Every You, Every Me at the Salisbury Playhouse and on tour, Fear of Music at Up in Arms and Out of Joint, and At First Sight, up in Arms at Latitude Festival and on tour. His 3 novels, The Vanishing Hours, Turning for Home, and 5 Rivers Met on a Wooded Plain, which was shortlisted for the RSL Ondaatje Prize and in fact won a Betty Trask Prize, are published by Doubleday. He's written 2 works of non-fiction, The Wellspring, Conversations with David Owen Norris, and To Bodies Gone, The Theatre of Peter Gill, both published by Seren. He is a Martin Esslin playwright in residence at Keble College, Oxford. Barney, thank you so much for being here and talking to us in times like these. I'd love it if you'd take us round your workspace a little, if you would.
Of course, I'd be delighted to. So I'm very fortunate. We moved just over 9 months ago, or just almost exactly 9 months ago, out of London, which means we own more than one room, which is really lovely. So I until last September, I wrote in a shed in the back garden of this flat I was in, but I now have a room for the first time since I was sort of a first year undergraduate to write in. So I can show you that a little bit if that's interesting.
That would be great. And where, I mean, would you tell us the general area of where you are?
Yeah, of course, I can show you. Hang on. So this is. Oh, is it not really? It's too bright, isn't it?
Green? No, lots of green and.
Blame the sun. I've got a view of the Surrey. I live just outside Barnham, in a village just outside Barnham on the Surrey-Hampshire border, which is great and has allowed me to, have a study.
And then that's actually an area that you've used, not that particular area, but the region is somewhere that figures in your fiction quite a lot.
Very much so, yes. Hampshire is my wife's home county, and my dad lived in Hampshire very extensively through the time that I was growing up, and so out of those two coincidences, I've done quite a lot of work set in Hampshire. We also live just up the road now from where I started life as a kid. I grew up in the shadow of Petworth House, effectively. My dad was the organist at Petworth Parish Church, or whatever church there is in Petworth, I don't know. And we lived in the Earl of Egremont's spare hunting lodge in a wood, which was cool and is sort of 30 minutes down the road. So this is quite home for me. It's a sense of getting home. Going all the way to Wiltshire felt a bit difficult because while it is, of course, the world's best county, it's also quite far from London. And if you work in the theatre, getting the last train home is a thing. So that was a big factor in our decision making. So I can show you the room a little bit. There's not that much to see. It's just sort of half the library. I keep all the non-fiction up here and the plays, and then a lot of poetry up there. I've got a little desk as well, which keeps. I've got a copy of everything I. Which is heap of some of that, but nonetheless, it all was as well as I did. And then I was trying to think of specifically interesting things that I could show you. There were only a couple that came to mind that feel important to me to have around. So I was very lucky to have a lot of very good teachers growing up, and I have some of their work on the walls around me. So one of my art teachers at school was a fella called Howard Phipps, who's a fantastic printmaker. Some of you might know his work. He's cool. But I have a couple of Howard's things up on the wall. Here's a little picture, which is a Wiltshire landscape, or South Wiltshire landscape, North Dorset, where I grew up. So I like to keep that with me. And then the other thing, which is very precious to me, is a poem that my tutor at Oxford, Bernard O'Donoghue, wrote to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Yeats International Summer School. So that really is the most important fortnight of my writing life. That time in 2009, I just finished Oxford. Bernard had helped me get a degree, and he helped me go to Sligo for a fortnight. He got me a scholarship because I was going to have to camp in a field, but he got me a room. And I went, and because it was the 50th, I don't know if anyone knows the Yeats Summer School. It's this wonderful, long established, or now I suppose 61-year-old literary weekend of workshops and so on. And all the most interesting Irish writers go there, and further afield. But I mean, of course, it's a principally Irish preoccupation because it's in Sligo. And I had the most amazing time. Got to meet Heaney, got to meet Longley, got to meet Evan Boland, got to meet Gerald Dorr. Spent time with Peter MacDonald and Bernard and various other people, and it was wonderful because it was the first time I'd ever felt like there was a gang I could be in, because they were all into poetry, but sort of universally, all the academics who were there studying Yeats, all the senior guys, Jonathan Allison and Dennis Donoghue and things like that, they would greet you by guessing your position on the rugby pitch. It was really odd. So lots of people would say, "Oh, you were beating prop forward, weren't you?" And I'd say, "Yes, I was."
Well, you're in that case.
Yeah, and it was the strangest thing because I like sport and I like poetry, and I was really always accept.
I hope that I'm aware that I'm popping in and out, and I hope that Barney is. You can hear Barney. There are slight stoppages, but we'll carry on right through these technical glitches. We leave you on the rugby field. Well, not on the rugby field, but Barney, can you go through that one again, because it's your conversations.
Of course, yeah. So it was just that I found. Do let me know if I'm dropping out again. I'll just carry on regardless, unless we lose it. If I stop moving the laptop, I think we'll be all right. But I've just found a group of people whose interests were the same as mine for the first time. I think, put very simply, it's a kind of non-pretentious interest in letters. is the thing that I found in Sligo. So the longest conversation I ever got to have with Seamus Heaney was about football, which I slightly regret, but I know what he thought about Manchester City at the time, who were Bernard's team. Bernard was a big fan of Nedum Onuoha. And so that was a great experience, because it felt like a family, and I got a sense there of what I wanted to do.
And yeah, absolutely. Well, and so you came back. I mean, tell us about your work, really, because you were a playwright, perhaps in the first instance, and then the novels started coming. How did that come about, really? I mean, your
The simplest expression of the truth is that it was an accident. And it's about Bernard again. When I finished at Oxford, I still kind of thought maybe I was going to be an actor, and I applied to some drama schools to see whether that could work, and I applied to some writing courses, writing MAs as well, to see whether they wanted me, and I got a lot of no's from the drama schools and a lot of yeses from the writing courses. And because that had been kind of the second plan, I hadn't put a lot of thought into which one I really wanted to go to. But the Royal Holloway MA was taught by Andrew Mosham, and Andrew had been Bernard's flatmate when they were both students.
Well,
and Andrew, yeah, small world. And he speaks very beautifully, and he wears good suits, and he's very refined and everything I'm not and would like to be. And I thought, well, if Bernard liked him, then he's got to be all right. So I'll go on his course and pick that one. And then discovered after I turned up for the first day that it was a novel writing program, and I thought it was mixed arts. So I'd gone there really to do theatre writing, but I'd already paid up, and I liked Joe Shapcott, who was a tutor on it. I liked Andrew very much. I just thought, well, I'll keep doing it and have a go. I always used to write stories as a kid, but usually they were about elves. But I could try and improve that. No, that's not fair. I had been writing very bad prose fiction at university, but I never showed it to anyone. It wasn't something I'd sent off to people. Really an accident, which also meant then that it took quite a long time.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't good yet. I hadn't done the reading that it takes to write a novel. The Oxford undergraduate degree course is good, but it's mostly about the dead, and of course you can learn an enormous amount from them, but there's more to learn, and so I had to do a lot of reading before I really got anywhere as a writer.
Yeah. So thinking about yourself, I suppose now, moving fast forwarding, though we might go back as well, is there a sort of chivying in your brain between doing, thinking that you've got a novel growing? Could it turn into a play in the interim, or what happens? That's not too.
No. So the difficult reality is that so far, there's always been this other thing in the way first, which was money.
Yes.
And so I've never yet had a blank canvas, I don't think, because there's always someone offering to pay you in a bill or something. So the reality is that to date,
I'm so sorry. I seem to have lost you, Barney, at the moment.
Oh, okay.
No. Yep. Sorry, I'm so sorry, everybody, about this, but it can only get better, I think. So, in this slightly different world that we all find ourselves in. Do you think? I mean, it can't. It's not necessarily. Is it a more ideal world for one discipline rather than another? Do you think? Or I mean, how have you?
Oh well, I mean, in terms of writing discipline, the the very difficult thing at the moment is that. Oh, sorry, Lilla Pennant and Karina Axelson. You can't. I've been gone, haven't I? You haven't heard me. I was probably talking rubbish. That's the case. Having said,
Yeah.
I think in terms of the impact of the present moment, the very difficult thing is that there is no certainty about when the theatre will exist again. So that feels quite challenging. However, I have written a play during lockdown, but I've been working on a book as well. So I sort of, when we first went into lockdown, I felt like everybody else. We want to know about the money. I'll go back to the money. But when we went into lockdown, it became immediately very difficult to write anything at all, because I think so much of the stimulus that anyone gets as an artist comes from interactions with people and places, and so when that is taken away from you, then it's very difficult to do anything. But I think being a professional is finding a way through that, and that's what makes you a writer, a professional writer rather than amateur writers. You go, well, look, I have to find the way to be creative. I had been working on a couple of things before the lockdown and tried to find my way into that as much as possible. Find my way into continuing to write that. And then as lockdowns eased up, it's been possible to go and see people again and start going for walks in the woods again and so on. And that has been very helpful.
Yes. I mean, it really does. The connections are quite important. And for you, because you're very, very acutely insightful about human relationships and all the rest of it, to be cut off can't be that easy.
No, although I do think Wordsworth has it right when he talks about emotion recollected in tranquility, and about needing 10 years to get to the heart of what you're trying to talk about. I mean, it's not a 10-year thing, but I found myself starting Thornton Heath, which is where I lived before we came here. While I was in Thornton Heath, I could never imagine writing about that place, because it was very different to everywhere I've
losing you again.
Left it.
Just sorry, very different to.
Oh, just very different to every world that I've written previously and lived in previously, and so that new cultural landscape needed to be learned from the beginning. But what I think I look for in every world that I'm writing is something like the dignity of the everyday and the pressures which shape people into what they are. Those pressures are very different in Thornton Heath than they are to South Wiltshire. Well, not very. I mean, they're similar, but they are different. But having left that place, I'm starting to be able to see what moves me about that place as well.
Yes, I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, I mean, you do have it appears to me, a very strong relationship with landscape. But how difficult is it being unable to spend time exactly where you might wish to at the moment? I mean, have you found that particularly? It doesn't sound as if you have found it inhibiting.
Well, I think I had this wonderfully well-timed house move, really, which just means that actually I'm closer to where I want to be than I have been since about 2010. I've lived in London for a decade, and I got free, and I am now in amongst the fields of home and the fields of memory, and can think about those places again. I've been able to go back to the house that we lived in when I was 4, which I haven't seen since we left it, and wander around the woods there and get under the skin of those memories, which has been quite stimulating because I live close to that place.
Yeah.
So it's actually getting converted into a big house now, the cottage we used to live in. So that's not so useful, but nonetheless, it's been interesting to write about.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're writing, well, I suppose either plays or fiction, do you enjoy I mean, what's your process in a sense? Do you sit down at a computer, a piece of paper, and how does it?
To my shame, I have become quite computer based. Actually, I avoided it, but then it started slowing me down. For a time, I found writing by hand was very useful because you have to work slower because handwriting is a slower process than typing.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay, fair enough. For me, handwriting takes longer than typing. But I used to find that copying from the handwritten draft across to the laptop draft was a good moment for editing. But actually, the thing I've found increasingly is that anything I do is about rhythm. The rhythms of languages, I'm hearing them as I make them up, and you can do that at closer to race pace, at closer to the pace of speech if you're typing. So I kind of write out loud really, and then write it down as I'm going. I sort of have to stop myself moving my mouth along with the words.
You seem incredibly good at dialogue, I think. And is that, I mean, are you talking to yourself in a sense? And
yeah, I think I probably am. Yeah, I mean, I've just been working on this play about South London. I've been sat in this chair for the last fortnight doing talking like this. Like I used to go, I'd be down right Charlton and Dagenham and talk to people around there. And I in this room talking like that for a fortnight, like a mad person, which I've really enjoyed. It's great. It's really nice, and it's as close as I can get to paid acting because I'm not very good, but I can do all the voices myself if no one else is listening.
Absolutely. Oh, now there's a question here which rather chimes with what I'd certainly like to know. It's from Robert Jaggs Fowler, and he says, "What does your writing day look like? Do you write every day, keep set hours, etc.? How does that?"
When I've got a project in hand, then I do try and write every day. In fact, I make sure I do. So with a novel, there are days where I do forgive myself if I do 500 words, because sometimes with a book, books are so big and so hard to work out what's going to happen in them in a way that, a play is a quarter of the size of a book. It's easier to know where you're going. And so there are days where you just go, look, I'll just do a description of a squirrel, and that's something I've kept my hand in. But I try to write 1,000 words a day. If I write 2,000 words a day, then I feel like I've done well. And I like to write quite quickly when I'm on the project. It's been really interesting studying the way I do it during lockdown because there's nothing else to get in the way. Yeah. And the thing I've found has been when there's a thing to write, then I try and get it done as quickly as possible because the synapses are connecting in your brain as you do it. So you don't want to go away from it. You want to get into it and get through it and get the story done, because in a week's time, you might not know what that connection was.
Mm. And I mean, there's actually another question.
And I don't.
Sorry, I think.
No, I was just to say, when I don't do a project, the other thing I've noticed is it's about going places to research, just sort of going to somewhere you haven't been before to try and stimulate things, and it's also about reading, just getting through all the reading that you possibly can to try and find the things you're interested in. I'm looking at my to read shelf. Sorry, that's what's up there.
Well, yes, I was going to ask about your library because I think you have I read that you were very sort of could be quite brutal with pruning your library.
Oh, I try to be, just because we moved house a lot for a while. And it's very heavy, and when you're in London, you're usually on the 48th floor, aren't you? And so it was purely a case of moving house, but then also of space. I have So these bookshelves here, my granddad made them for my dad.
Oh, lovely.
When my dad was when my dad finished his degree, he went to study under the pianist Yvonne Lefebvre in Paris for a year, and he fell out with her and they hated each other. But he did go to Paris and had a good time. And was very lonely and invited the Jehovah's Witness man in because no one else would talk to him. But I think he had a good time. And my granddad made those bookcases for him when he moved. So I've got them now, and I kind of like having things that are part of the history of my family. And so once those are full, it's just greedy, really. I mean, that's long gone. I've got a lot more than that, but I'm sort of quite proud of the furniture I've got, and so I'm trying to fill that rather than have to buy new ones.
Quite right. Well, it's lovely to have family things anyway, I think. Sort of. Gillian Stakes is saying, do you find it easier to write when you have a commission, or are you able to be creative for its own sake? Which is a very interesting question.
It is a really interesting question. As I say, I'm just beginning to be able to. For the last few years, there were a lot of financial pressures, a lot of bills, a lot of hospital bills, and so I had to do a lot for commission that I probably took because that it was a commission. But the hospital bills have stopped, and I am starting to try and just write because I have something I want to say. Which is vanishingly. I mean, it seems to happen about every 6 months that you think, okay, I could do something about this, and so I'm trying to break through to that and to taking time to work out what it is that I want to say. But it's a balance, isn't it? Because more heads are better than one, and so the stimulus of commission can sometimes lead you into types of creativity that you otherwise wouldn't try. I'm talking to a guy about a Thomas Hardy adaptation at the moment, and I'm talking to a theatre about doing an adaptation of the book I wrote with my dad as a stage show of some kind. Well, and these aren't ideas I'd have necessarily had, but I love them, and I mean, they're really fun, and they allow you to play in other paddling pools, so that is fun. But I am trying to start from me more.
I mean, I must ask you about the Wellspring, because I thought it was absolutely marvellous. Your 2018 book, I think, Conversations with...
You read it? You're kind. It was you. I knew someone had.
Yes, I am that one. Not. I am. How did you accomplish it? I mean, anyway, it's an extraordinary accomplishment to have such a deep conversation with a parent. I think that's an extraordinary thing. But I wondered if you'd done it online, or whether you'd recorded it, or, well, really, how you did.
Yeah, it was done. Actually, it was a Heaney thing. So Dennis O'Driscoll and Seamus Heaney did this book, Stepping Stones, which was a wonderful collection of essays. And I met Dennis as well. They're both gone now, but I loved what they did, and I thought this is quite an interesting approach to biography, but also to writing more generally, because you don't have control. Someone else is going to say something. I mean, I did have the right to edit. Most of the book I got final say, but Dad produced all the stuff. He said I just cut some of the things no one was ever going to get. I think I left in a bit too much that people weren't going to get. That it's quite a meandering river of a book, but nonetheless, like that was what I was excited about, was the giving up of control to another intellect that allowed that book to come into being.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad it did. And do you keep a writing diary? I mean, do you make notes all the time?
I am learning about myself on this front again, because I was getting rid of books when we last moved house, and I'd never chucked away any of the notebooks. When it was full, I put it on the shelf, and it had got quite formidable. And I thought, I tell you, in the back of my mind, I suppose, if I'm being completely honest, and this is terrible and hubristic, but I used to work for a fellow called Max Stafford Clark, who is now not as impressive a person to work for as he was, but nonetheless was an interesting person to work for. And Max used to flog his diaries to the British Library for £5 a pop. And I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, don't chuck your diaries away, because if life goes well, there's a pension in that. And we were moving house, and I thought, God, I've never looked at these. I've never noticed that I've built them up. Rubbish, absolutely full of terrible to-do lists and the mad self-interest of a sociopath and nonsense. So I've got rid of most of them, but I do write down little notes as they come. Obviously, research needs writing down somewhere. That's always helpful, but I'm not very coherent. I think some writers, I know Simon Stevens has published his writing diaries, and I certainly don't have any. Oh, and I have somewhere two good people. I have Fugard's writing diaries, and then I have Friel's. And the really funny thing about Brian Friel's writing diaries, which are here, you can buy them from Faber, they're great. So he chats for ages and ages and ages about, like, oh, maybe I'm going to do something about this. It's probably going to be about Ireland, because let's be honest, I'm Brian Friel. I'll probably think about, here we go, sporadic diary. I'm going to think about emigration and what impact that's had on my family and on the nation and so on. And then at some point, he stops writing the diary. And then a month later, he goes, play finished. It's called Philadelphia, Here I Come. He keeps a very extensive diary of the stuff when he didn't have anything to write. And then the minute he's got there, he stops putting anything in. So it's sort of not very helpful. And except it reminds you that the creative process is secret. And, you know, you're never really going to get to the heart of it. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's fine. And actually, I mean, I know that you're on the committee of the Society of Authors script writing group.
Yes.
Has that been active during lockdown, or what does it?
Well, actually, I think we've been in between meetings because it's a quarterly thing. So
that's very handy, yeah.
Yeah, I think there was one that was cancelled right at the start of lockdown, but we haven't actually missed the next one yet. So that should. Oh, hang on, that's a lie. I attended it. It happened on Zoom. I've just blanked a meeting. Sorry. Yes, so we've had a meeting.
Well,
there we go.
The next question is: are Zoom meetings more or less memorable? But
right, yeah.
I mean, what about Zoom? Just. I mean, it's just a very tedious thing. But how do you feel the need to take it, get away from Zoom meetings on the computer? I mean, how is it an interrupter or a benefactor?
I've only really been. It hasn't swamped my life. I've been quite lucky in that sense. I think I always prefer talking on the phone, really. But I do think, I mean, certainly, I do think what I've discovered through this period is that there are meetings I used to have to go and attend in person and go up to London for that I will just ask to have on Zoom in future, because I think
that's a way forward. Actually, that's a positive thing to take from this.
Yeah, it just feels ecologically mad to get on a train and go into the city and be responsible for a bit more smoke when you could just. I mean, I know powering a laptop, it also involves burning fossil fuels, but hey.
Sometimes the laptop seems like a telephone call anyway. If it's not being, yes. There's a lovely question here from Anna Brittner Guest saying, "Hi Barney, I have two questions, but I'll give you the first one. How do you choose the names for your novels?"
Okay, so I don't and never have. Yes, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with any of the powers that be about what I'm meant to say to this, but I've never picked the title of one of my books.
But you would say something if you didn't like them, presumably. I mean,
I should stop there. No. Well, I think the first book, Five Rivers Met on a Wooded Plain, which is memorable but too long, was a phrase in the novel which my agent Laura spotted and stuck as the title of the book, and it just kind of stayed. And never changed, and then it came out, and all along I thought, well, this is too long, isn't it? But it got published.
It's perfect.
Yeah. No, it's all right. Turning for Home, I think I had a title for that book, but basically it's sort of, as it's explained to me, it's kind of a marketing decision. So I don't want to detract from those titles, because they are arrived at after an enormous amount of thought and conversation between lots of people, which includes me, but also includes the editor, also includes my agent, also includes the publicity and marketing people at the publishers. I have just finished the second draft of a new novel, and my agent thinks my draft title is right. So
this could be the start of something new.
You never know. I might have got it right fourth time lucky. I think. I mean, yeah. To be. I really don't want to sound like I'm Mardy about it. I don't. I think they pick good titles.
Yeah.
But the Vanishing Hours was something that I think Alice Ewell, who was editing that novel, came up with, and Turning for Home, I think, was something that Suzanne Bridson, who was editing that novel, came up with. And Laura came up with Five Rivers Met on a Wooded Plain. So it's been someone different every time, but it's about seeking out something that that expresses the soul of a book. And I think I'm a little bit bleak in my tastes when it comes to titles. But this is also true in theatre, that titles get picked by various people, because someone sees the heart of what the play should be, and that's how you get to it. So
you can see it's working.
Yeah.
Do you have the same agent? This is a question from Alice Little. Do you have the same agent for all your genres?
So no. At the moment, as things stand, I have so Laura Williams at Green and Heaton looks after the fiction, and the dramatic rights of the fiction are subcontracted to a fellow called Jonathan Kinnersley at the agency, which is weird because Jonathan's a theatre agent too, and so he, therefore, I feel like I don't want him to. I don't want my theatre agents to be cross about him existing. So I'm represented as well by Simon Beresford and Cara Fitzpatrick at Dalzell and Beresford, who look after my plays and telly and things like that, original writing for dialogue. And then I've had other agents in the past. I had an agent who retired.
I mean, at what stage? At what stage did you have your first agent?
That's always an interesting process, isn't it? So Five Rivers was a book that I did the rounds with in the end. I sent it to everyone. I got a no from everyone. It's far too pastoral. It's not dramatic enough. It's too slow moving and contemplative. And then what happened was I sent it to Laura when she was just becoming an agent. She was an associate agent at PFD, having been an assistant agent. So she's starting to build her first list. And she said, if you chuck this out and start again, like write the same story but in this different way, then we could do something. So that I'd a guess that'll be the 25th person to have read that book. I think something. I mean, I didn't keep count. I don't know, but I sent it to all sorts of different people, and then Laura was just entering the biz, and so she was a fresh, she hadn't yet rejected me, so it was a very exciting opportunity.
Very exciting, actually. Good. You may be aware we've just obviously celebrated the Society's Authors Awards.
Prizes, yeah.
Very, very virtually great. And you know a lot about prizes, both on the winning, shortlisting,
and losing.
And judging.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. That.
There you are. From our point of view, you won a Betty Trask Award in 2017 and then became a judge for Sunset Bourne, which was, an excellent thing. So
it's been the most brilliant experience. I think the Somerset Maughams, so it's now, obviously you know this, but for the benefit of the tape, it's under 35-year-old writers. So that age bracket has gone up slightly, just to reflect the way that people's first books are happening later, and
Yes.
so if such a high proportion of great writers publish their first book after the age of 30, it's ridiculous to be limiting it there. So you guys changed that. I think I think that changed the year I started. So I've read, I would imagine, about 170, 180 books over the 3 years that I've been a judge for the Somerset Maughams, which was an amazing experience because you are immersed in the current moment in a way that you never would, because
see the zeitgeist.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think you also see, I read some wonderful books, but I think you also see that a writer's life before the age of 35 is the beginning of their writing life and not the peak of their writing life. There was something wonderful about, because obviously, my early career, I've done too much. Some of it was done for the wrong reasons. There are a few things that were passion projects which I was completely artistically sort of in control of, and I'm very proud of those. But there's the odd project where I think, oh, I got that wrong, and it's really comforting to meet your peer group and go, look, because I'm 33, so I didn't go up for the Somerset Maughams because that would have been dodgy. But that it's my peer group who are there, and you go, okay, well, Fiona Mosley's really terrifyingly good, but actually I can understand that some of these writers have written a better book before and will write a better book next time, and so on and so forth. And I have loved knowing that it's not just me who messes things up. Not that people have, oh, that's terrible. I'm not putting this well, but I've enjoyed seeing,
the whole pattern of there is, yes.
Yeah, the richness of it. And we read 3 or 4 poets whose work.
Yes, because the Somerset Maughams are open to fiction, non-fiction, poetry, so it's a wide brief.
Yeah, and I think there were poets whose work was sort of astonishing and felt finished and felt complete. I'm hugely excited about Roseanne Watt, who got a prize this year and whose collection I just thought was brilliant. Miriam Nash 2 years ago is someone else who I thought was absolutely fantastic. And Elmet was in there, and that's depressing that someone younger than you can write Elmet. You think, oh my word, this is extraordinary work. But there's all sorts of writing in there, and you get a lot from that.
Yeah,
it really widened my understanding of the contemporary.
I think he'd be very pleased at the the entries and the action that happens with his awards. I just wanted to ask you. There's a question from Johnny Sheehan, which has at the outset as an unknown quantity. I'm not sure any of us conceive that. But how did you persuade someone to take on your first play?
First play. Oh, I couldn't. So I've got to be careful how I tell this story because I've not talked about this before. So my first work, I couldn't get an agent for my theatre. I think in the theatre there's a simpler thing of, it really is about, can you make any money for an agent? And first time novelists I think have a better chance of making a bit of money for an agent, and you really can't get anywhere without an agent. So first time novelists, it's more normal to have an agent, but many playwrights don't start with one. I produced my first play in 2011, and then I made another play in 2012 and remounted that in 2013 on a tour. At that point in 2013, so on sort of project 3 or project 2.5, there was an agent who kind of got involved in my work, but really wanted me to try and work on telly, which at the time was not my priority. I've never thought telly is anywhere near as intellectually defensible as other media, and that may be changing, but it's not my background. And then also that got quite pissed at the press night of a play and tried it on with a mate of mine. And I thought, I'm not sure about this. And at that point, I did this play in 2014, really hope that person is not on this call, but I think they're not, probably. At that point, quite a lot of agents suddenly appeared when I wrote Visitors and offered to represent, which was a thing I'd produced myself and put on again. So that was kind of project 3.5. Still didn't have an agent, but one of them sat me down in Pinter's old writing chair and said, "Look, this is Harold's chair." And
you would get a connection with a writing object before we.
Yeah. It's important. So I got sat down in Pinter's chair and asked if I wanted to be represented by them, and said, "Yeah, of course, that'd be lovely." And that was the Judy Daish agency, who I was with until 2018, when the agent I was working with left the biz then.
Well, that seems to me that leaving you in that chair seems exactly the moment when I have to say I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time. Oh, goodness, Barney, we could have gone on so much longer. Thank you very, very much. Really terrific. It would be I want to, if I may, say that it's been a wonderful escape for us all, apart from anything else on this hot afternoon. Just to say again, if anyone would like to donate to the Authors Contingency Fund, do visit the link to the GoFundMe, which is in the chat box.
Yeah.
If you want to read books by our guest today, and I recommend it, they are available to order online from Blackwell's Bookshop and any other book you want. And by buying via this link, money will also go to the contingency fund. Again, that link is in the chat box. The next afternoon tea will be with Inoa Ellams on the 2nd of July.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And on this Monday coming, the 29th of June, don't miss Translations in Conversation. All these events and more, including one on July the 1st about the theatre in crisis with Piers Torday, Justin Audebert and Holly programme, are running till mid-July. So do check the SoA website for details. Barney, again, all our thanks for this afternoon. And thank you all for joining the conversation, and sorry about any small glitches during it. If you'd like to continue the conversation and discussion on Twitter, the festival hashtag is #SoA at home.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.